And so our first speaker today is going to be Professor Jonathan Haidt, and he's going to talk a little bit about maybe some of the unintended consequences of this technological change. So just to get right into the program, a warm welcome for Professor Jonathan Haidt.
Thanks, Paul. Okay. Well, good morning, Stern alumni. Welcome back. I have 3 questions for you, and if your answer is yes, put your hand up and hold it there. First question, do you have children? Raise your hand. Second question, do you plan to have children? Put your hand up. And put your hand up if you put it up for the first one too. Okay? And keep hold your hands up. Third question, do you work at a company that ever plans to hire people who are currently children? Raise your hand. Okay, so just about all of you. So this talk is for just about all of you. So as you may have noticed, we are experiencing an epidemic of teen anxiety and depression. And we really began to talk about this on campus about 2014, 2015. We started noticing it, and by 2016, there was a lot of coverage. Now, also around this time, a lot of strange stuff started happening on campuses that seems in some ways related to this. We began getting requests for trigger warnings if some book or speaker was going to come that some students would find upsetting. There was many more protests, often said that students would say that these speakers will be traumatizing to people who speak there. Students began asking for safe spaces to protect themselves, not from physical violence, but from words, ideas, and books that they thought would be upsetting or traumatizing to some of their fellow students. Now, the way to understand what's happening here, the key to all of this, is to realize that there was a change in generations. Kids who were born in 1996 and after are really different. They grew up in a different way from kids born before. Millennials always love this talk because I'm basically saying everything that's, all the weird stuff, it's not you, it's the next generation. So this generation born in 1996 and after is known as Gen Z. And you can see the difference behaviorally in this way. Nationally representative data about how teenagers use their time. What we see is when Gen Z enters the data set, the rate at which they get driver's licenses drops. It begins dropping with the late millennials, but it's really down for Gen Z. I guess they don't need a car because they're not going out drinking and going on dates or even going to a job. So for a lot of reasons, what are they doing? What are they doing with all their time? They're sitting at home on their phones. Now, they're different behaviorally and psychologically. As soon as Gen Z enters the data set, look what happens. This is the percentage of American teens who meet the criteria for having a major depressive episode. Not felt blue, but had a major depressive episode. As soon as Gen Z enters the picture, the boys go up, the girls go way up. 1 in 5 American teenage girls met the criteria for a major depressive episode in recent years. Same thing, different data set, same thing for college students. Back when college students were all millennials, the rates were relatively low. A question, do you have a psychological disorder? As Gen Z replaces the millennials, the rates go up for boys and way up for girls. Now, it's not just that they're comfortable talking about it. It's behavior, too. This is the number out of 100,000 American teens who were admitted to a hospital each year because they deliberately harmed themselves, mostly by cutting themselves. And what you see is that there's no trend up through 2009. But once Gen Z enters the picture, look what happens. The older teen girl rate is up 62%. Now, importantly, the young women who are millennials, their rate isn't actually up. The millennials did not get social media until college, and their mental health was not damaged. But the youngest teen girls, 10 to 14, they didn't used to cut themselves. But now that they're all on social media, it's up 189%. We see the same thing for suicide. The male rate is up 25%, the female rate is up 70%, and once again, for the youngest girls who have a very low rate to begin with, but the increase for that youngest set is up 150% increase in suicide rates for 10, 11, 12-year-olds in this country. We now have the highest rate for teen girls ever recorded. Now, why? Why is this happening? Well, you have to trace it out over just a few years. In 2006, Facebook opens up to the world, but very few preteens have it. The iPhone comes out in 2007, but it's expensive and very few teenagers have one. 2009 to 2011, that's the transition time. That's when we go from most teenagers are not on social media to by 2011, most are. It becomes the center of their interaction. It changes the fundamental nature of how they interact with each other. Now, why is it so much worse for girls? Girls use social media a lot more. What I've learned in doing this research is it's not screen time per se, it's specifically social media. So girls use social media a lot more. They have higher base rates of anxiety and depression to begin with. They're much more affected by the chronic social comparison. Just look how long they spend composing their selfies compared to boys who aren't even bothering because they're on Fortnite all day long. Girls are far more affected by the fear of missing out, fear of being left out, and really importantly, girls and boys are equally aggressive, but boys' aggression is physical, and so when they all are on phones, they stop punching each other. Whereas girls' aggression has always been relational, so when they're all on social media, now it's 10 times more frequent. This is not just a matter for students. It's now coming out into the work world. Young employees are much more depressed and anxious, and this is affecting businesses that are hiring recent college grads. Social media is one of the big causes, but there's another. I'm talking here about research I did in a book with Greg Lukianoff called The Coddling of the American Mind. It's based on 3 terrible ideas. I'll just go through one of them. Here's a really, really bad idea. To believe that what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. Of course, you recognize that this is the opposite of Nietzsche's dictum, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. The key idea here is called antifragility. Some things are fragile, so you protect them. But Taleb points out that what we want in kids is not just resilience, which is they don't get damaged. What kids are naturally is anti-fragile. That means that, so that's one of my good laugh lines, and I blew it. There are certain systems that actually get stronger when you drop them or challenge them or stress them. So your bones get stronger if you use them hard. Your immune system can only develop if it's exposed to bacteria. And if you protect a kid too much, you damage the immune system. And the same is true for the whole child. Kids are fragile, and we want to protect them, but if we protect them, if we're always there to help them, then they don't get a chance to grow strong and independent themselves. We have to keep being there. And if we are always there for them, well, then we kind of have to keep being there. And if they get a bad performance review, we have to kind of call their boss and say, why did you give my son a bad performance review? This really happens nowadays. Now, the proof of this, of how radically things changed in the 1990s is this. I want to ask you all, at what age were you let out? At what age could you go out of the home and go to a friend's house, and you and your friend could go around somewhere? So look at that. What age was it for you? Just call it out. As I point to your age, just call it out. What age? 12. Okay, this is a mixed age group. All right. All right. If I had more time, I'd do it by generation. What I always find is that for Gen X and before, it's age 6. And for Gen Z, the younger kids, it is 10 to 12. So we stopped letting kids out in the 90s, and I think we're paying the price now. We didn't give them the chance to learn how to deal with ordinary stress. All stories about childhood are like this, but we said, no more of that. You need to take your parents with you. And when you deprive kids of a lot of free play, you actually increase psychopathology. There's research on this. So what I'm saying is not that we want playgrounds like this, okay? Because what kills you does not make you stronger. What we want is playgrounds like this, because on this kind of playground, you can get hurt. And that's important, because if you can get hurt, then every day you have dozens of chances to learn how to not get hurt. Whereas my kids grew up on these playgrounds, they don't get that chance. The basic lesson is prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child. Nassim Taleb's advice to college students is to notice that a candle flame is fragile. One puff of wind and it goes out. But if it gets big enough, it's anti-fragile. The harder you blow on it, the stronger it gets. His advice is you want to be the fire and wish for the wind. I'll end with just 2 pieces of advice for those of you who have children especially. I urge you to visit letgrow.org. It's a wonderful organization run by Lenore Skenazy, who wrote Free Range Kids. I'm on the board of it. And we're trying to help parents, families, and neighborhoods and schools give independence back to kids. And I'll end with some very specific advice, because a lot of you are wrestling with the same thing that I am. We're all wrestling with the same thing if your kids are over 5 years old on screen time. 3 very simple rules. Just get all screens out of the bedroom by a certain time. There's no reason they should have it overnight. No social media until high school. And agree on a time budget, whether it's an hour a day or more or less, but have a time budget. Otherwise, the tech companies will suck up all of your kids' time. That's it. For more information, please visit thecoddling.com. And welcome back to Reunions. Great to see you all. Bye-bye.